At 13, my abusive dad kicked me out into the January cold half naked, saying, "You don't deserve to live," after believing my golden brother's lies about me. Later, karma hit them hard. I was 26 years old, a mechanical engineer who owned his own house, but that night at 13 had been the capstone of my entire childhood. My parents were older when they had me, already 36. I felt less like a wanted child and more like a biological middle finger from the universe, upsetting the comfortable routine they had established with my two older siblings. My brother, Garrett, was 4 years my senior and the undisputed golden child. He played varsity baseball, kept his grades decent enough, and had the right friends. My dad, whose pride and joy was directly tied to Garrett's success, went to every game, bought him the best gear, and spoke about him as if he were destined for greatness. My sister, Kendra, was 2 years older than me. She was a master of the secondary victim role, always taking after my mother. If she broke something, I was blamed. If money went missing from Mom's purse, she swore I did it. She had this uncanny ability to start a fight, then burst into tears the moment Dad walked in, ensuring I would take the hit instead of her. My mother never intervened. She was too busy using every moment of household chaos to make herself the center of attention. If Dad hit me, she would cry about the stress and how hard she worked, making my pain about her own perceived victimization. If I tried to complain about Kendra, she would sigh dramatically and ask why I always caused problems. She turned herself into the victim of every situation, even the ones that had nothing to do with her. The worst part of living in that house was the constant uncertainty. I never knew what would set Dad off. It could be anything, a B on a math test, resulting in the paper being thrown in my face and being called stupid, or, one time, accidentally breaking a glass while washing dishes, which led to an hour standing outside on the back porch in the autumn chill, no coat or shoes, while he watched television as if nothing were happening. My siblings were just background noise in their perfect little lives, always stepping around me and the danger I represented. There was only one person who saw past the chaos and gave a damn. Dad's father, my pop, lived about 30 minutes away and came around maybe once a month. When he did visit, he saw the faint marks on my arms, the way I flinched if someone moved too fast, and how quiet I was compared to Garrett and Kendra. He never called them out directly, but I knew he saw. Pop always made a point of talking to me, asking about school, and bringing me books. He was the only decent one in the whole family. My mother hated his visits. She would put on a tense, fake smile, and Dad would be on his best behavior, both of them acting as if they feared Pop would finally call them out on the abuse. Then Garrett messed up, and instead of taking responsibility, he threw me under the bus so hard it cost me my childhood. Dad collected vintage baseball cards, not just any cards, but expensive ones. His prized collection was a binder full of cards from the 1960s and 1970s, some worth hundreds of dollars each. They were locked in a cabinet in his office. Garrett was the golden child, so Dad had given him the combination months ago, citing trust and responsibility. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I came home from school and went to my room to start homework. About an hour later, I heard Garrett's door open and close, then the front door slam. I looked out the window and saw him driving off fast. He was supposed to be at baseball practice. Dad got home around 6 o'clock. I heard him go straight to his office, heard the cabinet open, then silence. Then, the worst sound in the world, a cold, dangerous quiet. "Where are my cards?" His voice wasn't loud. That quiet voice meant someone was about to be destroyed. I pressed my ear against my door to hear better as Dad's voice boomed. "Garrett, get down here right now." Garrett must have returned while I was distracted because I heard his footsteps on the stairs. "Yeah," Garrett asked. "Where are my cards?" "My 1967 set. 3 of them are missing from the binder." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could picture Garrett's face as he realized he was caught. Then, I heard the words that changed everything. "I didn't touch them. Must have been him. Your youngest. He's always in your office snooping around. I saw him in there last week." My stomach plummeted. My stomach plummeted when Garrett finished his lie, but I couldn't afford to be paralyzed. I slammed my door open and walked out into the hallway, forcing myself to look straight at my dad. "I didn't touch anything," I stated, my voice shaking but firm. "I don't even know the combination to your cabinet." Dad turned, his face going from that dangerous quiet to fiery red, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jump. "You calling your brother a liar, Brendan?" I glanced at Garrett. He stood there, shoulders slumped in a performance of innocence, his eyes flat and devoid of any remorse for the chaos he was creating. It wasn't just a lie. It was the conscious decision to throw me into the line of fire he knew so well. I took a breath. "I'm saying I didn't take anything. He's lying." Garrett dropped the act instantly. His face contorted, and he took a step forward, his voice rising. "Say that again. You're lying. You took the cards and now you're blaming me." The rage was immediate, fueled by 13 years of injustice. Garrett shoved me hard, sending me stumbling back against the wall. Before I could even steady myself, I shoved him back. We went at it right there in the narrow upstairs hallway. the carpet muffling the sound of our feet, but not the desperate swinging of fists or the thudding as we crashed into the walls. It was barely 10 seconds, a flash of uncontrolled violence, before Dad's massive hands clamped down on us. He dragged us apart, spinning me and throwing me down onto the floor, making my head rattle. He stood over me, his face inches from mine. Where are they? His voice was ice now, cold and absolute. I don't know, I gasped, tears finally blurring my vision, not from pain yet, but from sheer terror and frustration. I didn't take them. He grabbed my shirt and hauled me up, dragging me to my small, closet-sized room. He tore through my few possessions, throwing books off the shelf, dumping out drawers, ripping my sheets off the bed to check the mattress. He found nothing because there was nothing to find. But it didn't matter. Garrett had spoken, and Dad always believed the golden child. My mother came home in the middle of the search. She stood in the doorway, took in the chaos, saw me on the floor with Dad looming, and let out a huge, dramatic sigh. "What's happening?" she asked, not with concern, but with exhaustion. "Your son stole my cards," Dad said, breathing hard. Mom looked at me, then at Dad, then sighed again, even bigger this time, as if I had ruined her entire day. "Why do you always do this to us?" "Not, are you okay? Or let's figure this out." Just making herself the victim of my being wrongly accused. I tried one last time. "I didn't take anything." "Then who did?" Mom's voice was sharp. "Garrett, stop lying." Garrett called from the hallway, his voice thick with false authority. Kendra walked in then, home from whatever friend's house she had been at. Dad pulled her into the room, his eyes sharp. "Did you see your brother in my office?" Kendra looked at Garrett, then at me, then back at Dad. I could see the quick calculation in her eyes, choose the golden child or the family punching bag. She sighed, settling on the easy lie. "Yeah," she said. "Last week. I saw him coming out of there." She hadn't been home all week, but that didn't matter. She was backing Garrett, securing her place in Dad's good graces. 2 against 1, both of them lying, throwing me to the wolves. Dad grabbed my arm. His grip was tight enough to bruise, digging his fingers into my forearm. "You're going to tell me where those cards are?" "I don't know because I didn't take them." He backhanded me across the face, a hard, sharp blow. My head snapped to the side, and I immediately tasted the metallic tang of blood. Mom made a little gasp but didn't move or speak. Garrett and Kendra just watched. "Tell me," he demanded. I didn't do it. He hit me again and then again. The room swam. My ears were ringing and the throbbing in my face was immediate and intense. I stopped trying to defend myself, just bracing for the impact. What was the point? When he finally stopped, I was on the floor, curled up, breathing raggedly. Dad stood over me, breathing hard and shaking slightly. "You cost me thousands of dollars," he said, his voice low and hateful. "Those cards were worth more than you'll ever be." Then he said the thing that truly broke me, that severed any remaining thread of connection. "I wish we'd never had you." A strange, cold feeling washed over me, silencing the pain and the fear. The room went dead silent. Even Garrett and Kendra looked shocked. Dad's face went from red to purple. I looked up at him, my voice flat, the last flicker of 13-year-old hope gone. "You shouldn't have had me if you hate me this much." "What did you say?" he roared. "I said you shouldn't have had me," I repeated, pushing myself to my knees. "You've made it pretty clear I'm a mistake you've been trying to ignore for 13 years. So yeah, you shouldn't have had me?" He grabbed me and dragged me out of the room, down the stairs and to the front door. He yanked it open. It was January. Snow covered the ground and the temperature was in the low 20s. I was wearing only a t-shirt and shorts, no coat, no shoes. I was essentially half naked in the freezing weather. "Get out," he screamed, his face a mask of pure hate. "You don't even deserve to live." "You are not my son." He shoved me onto the front porch and slammed the door with a thunderous sound that echoed through the otherwise quiet neighborhood. I heard the lock click into place. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, too stunned to move, the freezing air immediately starting to bite. Then I heard Dad's voice through the door, muffled but still yelling at Mom. Nobody was coming. The cold hit fast. Within a minute I was shivering uncontrollably. I pounded on the door. Dad, come on! It's freezing!" Nothing. I kept pounding, kept yelling. The neighbors had their lights on, but no one came out. They were used to Dad's noise. This was just another Tuesday night. After 10 minutes, my fingers were going numb. I gave up and stumbled down the driveway in my thin socks, the snow instantly soaking them. I walked down the street, my teeth chattering, until I reached the Shell station about half a mile away. I went inside. The clerk gave me a weird look but didn't say anything when I used the payphone. I called Pop. "Hello," he answered, his voice always steady. "Pop, it's me." My voice was a choked mess. "Hey, kiddo." "What's wrong?" "Dad kicked me out. I'm at the Shell station on Maple. Can you come get me?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he promised. "Stay inside where it's warm." Pop arrived in 20 minutes on the dot. He took one look at me. My bruised face, my near hypothermic shivering, my soaked socks, and his face went hard, drawn tight with cold fury. He didn't ask what happened until we were in the car, wrapped in a blanket. I told him everything. The cards, Garrett's lie, Kendra backing him up, Dad's violence, and being thrown out in the snow. Pop drove silent, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. When we got to his small house, he forced me into a hot shower and gave me warm clothes. Then he called Dad. I couldn't hear Dad's side, but Pop's voice was thunder, even when kept low. You kicked a 13-year-old out in the snow. I don't care what he supposedly did. He's staying with me. If you show up here, I'm calling the police and telling them everything. The hitting, the neglect, all of it. Try me. He hung up the phone and looked at me. You're staying here permanently, Brendan. What about custody? I'll handle it, Pop said firmly. Your mother will sign whatever I need her to. She won't want cops asking questions about how her son ended up sick from exposure. Besides, I know a family lawyer who owes me a favor. We'll file for emergency custody first, then permanent guardianship. With the documented abuse and what just happened, they won't fight it, trust me. I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of Pop's promise. I'll handle it. Until the next morning, I woke up shivering violently, burning up with a fever, every joint aching. Standing in the snow for 10 minutes and walking half a mile in wet socks had done its damage. Pop rushed me to the doctor. I had a nasty cold and mild exposure symptoms, but the doctor emphasized how much worse it could have been. Pop was livid when he heard that prognosis. I spent 2 weeks in bed feeling utterly miserable, but those weeks were transformative. Pop took care of me the entire time. He brought me warm soup, kept track of my medicine, and sat patiently with me when the fever made me slightly delirious. He was there unconditionally, for the first time in my life. My mother came by once. She stood awkwardly in the doorway of my temporary room, her eyes darting everywhere but at me, while Pop gave her a silent, freezing glare from across the room. She signed some papers Pop's lawyer had drafted, asked in a flat, monotone voice if I was okay, and then left quickly. She was gone within 5 minutes, fleeing the silence and judgment that permeated the small house. I never went back to my old home. Living with Pop was fundamentally different. It was quiet. Nobody screamed. Nobody hit me. Nobody made me feel like I was a burden or a mistake that needed to be ignored. Pop lived simply in a small, slightly run-down 2-bedroom house on the edge of town. He didn't have much money, but the atmosphere was stable, predictable, and safe. The first few months were strange. I was perpetually tense, flinching whenever a door closed too quickly. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Pop to tire of me, for him to get angry, for him to send me back. It took months for the instinctual anxiety to subside and for me to finally understand that he genuinely wanted me there, that his care was unconditional. This was what real family felt like. With the constant stress of my old house gone, school became surprisingly easy. My grades, which had always been decent despite the chaos, went from good to excellent. It turned out that when you weren't living in survival mode, dedicating your mental energy to learning was simple. By freshman year of high school, I was pulling straight A's without feeling like I was trying that hard. I channeled that energy, that drive for survival into a new, calculated goal: complete and absolute independence. I started working almost immediately. I was 14, but I lied about my age and said I was 16 to wash dishes at a busy diner. The manager, a pragmatic woman named Marlene, didn't ask too many questions. She liked that I was reliable, showed up on time, and never complained no matter how miserable the work was. Within 2 years, I had learned the rhythm of the kitchen, and was working the line during the busiest dinner shifts. The money wasn't great, but every dollar was saved and accounted for. I was obsessed with building a financial cushion, determined never to be dependent on anyone else again, especially not one bad break away from being thrown out into the cold. Dad never reached out, not once. Neither did Garrett or Kendra. They simply went on with their lives, their silence confirming my irrelevance to them. Sophomore year, my physics teacher badgered me into joining the robotics club. I hadn't planned on it, but he insisted I had the right kind of logical brain for engineering. I joined reluctantly, and surprisingly, I loved it. I loved the precision of building things, the clear logic of solving a problem, and working with my hands to create something tangible. Our team made it to the state championships that year. We didn't win, but placing in the top 10 was huge for our small school, and it gave me focus. Junior and senior years became a relentless mission focused on college and scholarships. I spent hours writing essays, filling out every application I could find, and securing recommendations. The responses started trickling in the following spring. I received a few small academic awards and grants. Then, in April, the big one arrived: at a full-ride scholarship to the State University for Engineering. Tuition, room, board, everything was covered. I showed the letter to Pop. He read it carefully twice, his lips moving silently over the words. When he finished, he put the letter down and pulled me into a rare, tight hug. "Proud of you, kiddo," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. I graduated third in my class. Pop was there, sitting in the front row, clapping louder than anyone when they called my name. My parents and siblings did not show. I didn't expect them to. Their absence was another quiet confirmation of my freedom. College was a different world. I was surrounded by people who were driven, who cared about learning, and who had goals beyond mere survival. I threw myself into mechanical engineering. The coursework was brutal, just as hard as I had been preparing for my entire life. I kept working throughout, securing a job in the university machine shop. During summer breaks, I took 12-hour shifts at a manufacturing plant. It was miserable, bone-weary work, but the money was excellent. My obsession with building a financial cushion only intensified. I never wanted to be one bad decision away from having everything stripped from me. I graduated at 22 years old with an engineering degree, absolutely zero debt, and a solid chunk of savings in the bank. I was hired immediately by a mid-sized aerospace company. The starting salary was $65,000 a year. To a kid who grew up getting beaten and sleeping in a room the size of a closet, that was life-changing money. I moved to a different city for the job, rented a decent apartment, and bought a used car with cash. I forced myself to keep living like I was still broke, even though I wasn't anymore. For 3 years, I lived on maybe 40% of my income, saving and investing the rest aggressively. I was finally succeeding, not through my father's distorted vision of discipline, but through pure, calculated hard work. I was safe. I graduated with zero debt and a secure job paying $65,000 a year. To a kid who had been literally left to freeze, $65,000 was a fortress. For 3 years, I lived well below my means, funneling maybe 60% of my income into aggressive savings and investments. I was not just building a financial cushion. I was building a barricade against the world, against ever needing anyone, against ever being vulnerable again. At 25, I finally had enough saved for a substantial down payment on a house. I found one in a quiet neighborhood, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom place with a decent yard. It needed some work, but nothing major. I put down such a huge chunk of cash that the mortgage payment was lower than the rent I used to pay for my tiny apartment. The house was mine, legally, irrevocably. I spent the first month fixing it up myself. I painted the walls, replaced the old fixtures, and fixed the broken fence in the backyard. I transformed it from a rundown investment property into something that felt like an actual, solid home. The day I finished installing the last coat of paint on Pop's new bedroom, I called him. "Hey, kiddo, how's the new place?" he asked. "It's good," I said. A smile I hadn't realized was there cracking my voice. "Listen, I've got 3 bedrooms here, and I'm only using one. You should move in." There was a long silence on the other end, the kind of silence that held a lifetime of consideration. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. "Yeah. You took me in when I had nothing. This is me paying that forward. Besides, your house is falling apart, and you're too stubborn to admit it." He laughed, a rare, gruff sound. "Fair enough." 2 weeks later, Pop moved in. We converted the best bedroom into his space, setting him up with everything he needed. He tried to pay rent, insisted on covering utilities, but I refused every attempt. "You already paid, Pop," I told him gently. "You paid when you picked me up from that gas station and gave me a chance. We're even." We settled into a simple, easy routine. I worked during the day. He took care of light maintenance and errands. Most nights we ate dinner together, just normal meals with easy conversation. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a family. A quiet, stable, unconditional unit built on shared respect and rescue. This went on for about a year. The best year of my life: stable job, excellent income, my own house, and the one person who cared living comfortably under my roof. I was safe, and Pop was safe. Then Dad showed up. I pulled into my driveway on a Thursday after work and immediately saw a car I didn't recognize. An older sedan, a bit beat up. A cold, heavy feeling settled in my gut, the kind of instinctive dread I hadn't felt since I was 13. Pop was standing on the front porch, looking tense and unnaturally still. As I got closer, I saw why. Dad was there. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but he still had the same hard, demanding expression. That look that used to make the 13-year-old me flinch was still there, but it no longer held power over me. I later learned he'd been sniffing around the old town, asking questions until he got my name, then finding my address through public records. Property ownership was not hard to find. "Can I help you?" I kept my voice flat, devoid of emotion. He looked me up and down, sizing up my nice clothes, my decent car, and the house behind me. "So, you did all right for yourself," he said, nodding. "Nice house. What do you want?" "I came to check out my new place," he stated. I almost laughed, the absurdity of his arrogance staggering. "Your what?" "This house is mine. I'm moving in," he said, as if stating a simple fact. "I lost my apartment last month and I need somewhere to stay. You've got the space and I'm your father. It's your responsibility to take care of me. You are not moving in." He waved his hand dismissively, as if I were being a dramatic child. "Don't be difficult. This house is too nice for just you anyway. You probably can't even afford it on your own. I'll help with expenses once I find work." "I own this house," I said, my voice hardening. "And you are not stepping foot inside it. You wouldn't even know how to be successful if I hadn't raised you right," he pressed, taking a step toward me. "Everything you have is because I taught you discipline. The least you can do is give me a room." Pop made a small, involuntary sound beside me that might have been a scoff. I just stared at my father. "Don't be selfish," he lectured. "I'm your father. You owe me that much." "I don't owe you anything." His face hardened instantly. "Watch your tone. I don't care how old you are. You don't talk to me like that." He tried to intimidate me with his size, taking another step forward. "You think you're tough now? You're still that scared little kid who couldn't even look me in the eye." The memory of the cold snow and the metallic taste of blood flashed in my mind. "No," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm the adult you made when you beat me for 13 years and threw me out in the snow. And I'm telling you to get off my porch before I make you leave." He raised his voice, desperate now. "You wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for me raising you. You beat me for 13 years and threw me out because you believed a lie about a few baseball cards. You cost me thousands of dollars and now you owe me." "I didn't touch your cards," I reminded him calmly. "Garrett stole them." "That's what you said then, and it was garbage then too. Always lying to get out of trouble." "Well, now you're going to make it right. I'm moving in, and you're going to cover my expenses until I'm back on my feet. It's the least you can do after what you put me through, and I'm not offering." "This conversation is over. This conversation is over. Leave. You don't get to tell me what to do." "Actually, I do," I said. "It's called property rights. This is my house. You are trespassing. Leave now or I'm calling the police." He laughed, mean and sharp. "The police for what?" "Trespassing. Harassment. I can file assault charges from when I was a kid if you want to make this interesting." "Pop kept records. Didn't you, Pop?" Pop nodded slowly. "Hospital visits, photos of bruises, dates and times, all of it. I've got everything." Dad's expression shifted. He was finally calculating, realizing this wasn't the helpless 13-year-old he remembered. This was an engineer who knew the law and had evidence. "You're making a mistake," he muttered. "Family is supposed to help each other. You stopped being family when you kicked me out for something I didn't do," I said. "Now you're a stranger on my porch who won't leave. I'm going inside to get my phone. If you're still here when I come back, I'm dialing 911. Your choice." I turned and walked toward the door. I heard him start to say something, but Pop cut him off sharply. "You heard him. Go." I went inside, grabbed my phone, and returned. He was still there, but he had backed up a few steps, his car door open. "You're going to regret this," he said, his voice low. "No, I really won't. Here's how this goes. You leave now. You don't come back. You don't call. You don't show up at my work. If I see you anywhere near my property again, I'm filing a restraining order and pressing every charge I can think of. Pop's got enough documentation to make your life very difficult. Am I clear?" His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists. I thought for a second he might try one last act of violence, but the fear in his eyes outweighed the rage. He got into his car. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is. If I see you again, you're going to jail. That's a promise." He drove off, the tires squealing slightly in a final, childish protest. Pop and I stood there for a minute, watching the street. "You think he'll come back?" Pop asked. "Maybe. Doesn't matter. If he does, I'll follow through. I'm done with him. He wasn't getting this house. He wasn't getting anything from me. Ever again." Dad drove off. His final squealing tires were a pathetic footnote to the confrontation. Pop and I watched him go, then went inside. I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks, and I started settling back into the quiet, safe routine of my life with Pop. But then the silence broke. Garrett texted me. It was the first message I had received from him in 13 years. "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the message on my phone. Talk about what? The answer was obvious. I typed a response without emotion. "About what?" "About everything. I messed up back then. I want to apologize for real." "You already tried that once," I texted back, referring to the hollow apology he probably mumbled to his conscience the night he threw me to Dad. I didn't care then either. "I know, but things are different now. Dad's been on my case constantly." "I'm trying to fix things with the family. Not my problem. Come on, man. We're brothers." That phrase, "we're brothers," almost made me laugh out loud. "We've never been brothers. You threw me under the bus to save yourself and watched me get beat for it. Then you went on with your perfect life while I got kicked out in the snow. Whatever you need, figure it out yourself." I put my phone down, figuring that was the end of it. But Garrett kept texting. Over the next few days, he sent over a dozen messages. Some were awkwardly apologetic, some tried to guilt-trip me by listing his own recent misfortunes, and some were just rambling about how hard things were for him. I ignored all of them. The sheer volume of his communication, after 13 years of silence, betrayed a panic that was growing. Then, he sent one that caught my attention, a message that confirmed the unstable chaos I suspected was brewing. "Dade's losing it. I think he's going to do something crazy." I stared at that message for a long minute. A part of me, the old bruised part, didn't care what happened to them. But another part, the cold, strategic engineer part, saw a perfect, shining opportunity. Garrett was scared. Dad was unstable, and somewhere in that chaos Garrett was probably worried the truth might finally surface. It was time to push that one fatal button. Yeah. I texted back, giving him a sliver of false cooperation. Pop mentioned something about that. Said Dad's been telling people he thinks he was lied to back then. I hit send and waited. The three dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Garrett was typing, deleting, retyping. I could practically smell his growing fear. Finally, the reply came through. What do you mean? Pop ran into one of Dad's old friends at the hardware store. I lied, fabricating the story with precise detail. The guy said Dad's been going on and on about how his kids screwed him over, how someone lied to him about something important, and he's been thinking about it for years. More typing, more deleting. Pop seemed to think it was serious, though. Said Dad kept mentioning the cards. Kept saying he needed to figure out what really happened. I could picture Garrett's face now. The panic calculation. The sinking realization that his safety net was rotting. That's just Dad being Dad. Maybe, he typed a weak attempt to retreat. Pop seemed to think it was serious, though. I reiterated. Look, he texted. I need to tell you something. Go ahead. The dots appeared and disappeared for a full 2 minutes. It was agonizingly slow, the sound of his pride and self-preservation battling it out across the city. When the message finally came through, it was long, desperate, and the most satisfying thing I had read in my life. Okay, look. I need to be straight with you, because Dad's spiraling and I need backup here. Remember those cards?
Yeah, that was me.
I took them to sell because I needed cash for something. Sold 2 of them, but the '67 mantle got damaged in my car before I could move it. I panicked and blamed you because Dad was already on the warpath and you know how he gets. I read it once, letting the words sink in. Then I read it again. Theft and permanent damage, not an accident. I screenshot the entire thread immediately, securing the evidence, and sent it to my personal email, backing it up to cloud storage. Garrett was still typing. But here's the thing. Dad's been a psycho about this for years. Like legitimately obsessed. He brings it up whenever he's mad about anything. My son destroyed my cards. My life went downhill after that. Like, dude, they were just baseball cards. He's used that story as the reason for why everything in his life sucked. He acts like you burned down his house. And now he's apparently telling people he was lied to. The man's unhink. Another message followed. I'm not saying what I did was right, but we both know Dad made everything worse than it needed to be. He's the one who beat you over some cardboard. He's the one who kicked a kid out in the snow. I made a mistake, but he's the problem here. And if he's really digging into this now, I need you to have my back. We can tell him together. Make him understand it was just a dumb kid mistake, and he needs to let it go. You know how he gets when it's just one person. But if we both talk to him, maybe he'll actually listen for once. One final, pathetic plea. Can you help me out here? I'm serious about making this right, but I can't deal with Dad alone. You've always been smarter about handling him anyway. I sat there looking at my phone, the warmth of the device a stark contrast to the coldness in my chest. After all these years, he had just handed it to me. He confessed in writing, because he thought I would help him manage Dad. He thought he could rewrite the abuse, blame Dad entirely, and get me to be his human shield. Even better, he had admitted to theft, not just a petty mistake. This was almost too easy. Yeah, I texted back. I'll help. He sent back a relieved, frantic string of thanks. Thank you, man. Seriously, I knew you'd understand. Dad's always been the real problem, and we both know it. When do you want to talk to him? I didn't respond. I opened a new text message. The recipient was Dad. Then I put my phone away and went back to work. Yeah, I'll help. That was the last thing I had sent to Garrett. It was the confirmation he wanted, the reassurance that his shield was in place. But instead of collaborating on a plan, I simply opened the thread with Dad, selected Garrett's entire written confession, and hit forward. Then I went to work. I didn't add a single word of my own. The confession spoke for itself. I didn't check my phone for 2 hours. I needed the distance, the space to let the chaos I had unleashed gain momentum. I imagined Dad opening that text, reading his golden boy's clear, undeniable admission of theft, lies, and the deliberate framing of his younger brother. I pictured the moment the 15-year-old anger, fueled by the damage to his precious cards, was replaced by the cold, 40-year-old realization that he had beaten and banished the wrong son. When I finally glanced at my phone during a break, the screen was a blinding flood of notifications. I had 23 missed calls, 12 from Garrett, 8 from Kendra, and 3 from my mother. It was exactly the desperate fallout I had anticipated. I listened to one voicemail from Garrett. His voice was completely unrecognizable, raw with panic and pain. He was yelling, begging me to call Dad and say I was lying, or that I had somehow faked the screenshot. He claimed Dad had beaten him so badly he could barely stand, and then, the perfect, devastating symmetry. Dad had thrown him out and told him never to come back. It was the sound of his entire life being dismantled in an instant, the golden foundation shattering beneath him. The satisfaction was immense, cold, and absolute. 2 days later, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Family meeting tonight, 7 o'clock post-meridian. Your mother's house. Be there. It was Dad. 10 minutes later, another text followed confirming the command. This is not optional. I showed Pop the messages. He read them calmly. Are you going? He asked. Of course, I replied. I need to watch the curtain call. I arrived at my mother's house right at 7. I saw Dad's large truck parked in the driveway. Garrett's beat-up car was there too, probably borrowed from a friend or left abandoned before he was kicked out. Kendra's small sedan was present as well. The whole dysfunctional cast was assembled. I didn't bother knocking. I simply opened the front door and walked in. The entire family was gathered in the living room, the atmosphere thick with tension that was almost physical. Mom was frozen on the couch, looking nervous and drawn. Kendra was beside her, fidgeting. Garrett was sitting stiffly in an armchair, desperately attempting to project a casual, wronged party appearance, but his eyes were puffy and his movements betrayed pain. Dad was standing in the middle of the room, using the coffee table as a display stand for his open laptop. Everyone turned when I walked in, and the noise level dropped to 0. Garrett's already pale face went white, draining of any remaining color. What's he doing here? Garrett demanded, his voice thin. Dad looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I had never seen before, not simple rage, but a chilling mix of humiliation and destructive clarity. Sit down, Dad commanded me. I ignored him completely, remaining standing near the doorway, arms crossed over my chest. I felt every inch of my 26-year-old height, every dollar of my earned income, every ounce of my independence. Mom started to say something, a pathetic, conciliatory sound, but Dad cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. Everyone shut up and listened. The room fell silent. Dad slowly walked over to the coffee table and gestured to the laptop screen. Displayed clearly, filling the screen in large, magnified text, was Garrett's confession. Every word of it, the theft, the damage to the mantle card, the panicked decision to blame me, and the years of silence. Garrett, Dad said. His voice was low, terrifyingly calm. Want to explain this? Garrett shifted uncomfortably in his seat, rubbing his hands on his knees. Dad, I already told you he's lying. He faked that somehow. I don't know how, but he edited it. Stop. Dad's single word was a concrete block. Garrett stopped talking instantly. I made you show me the thread on your phone earlier today. Dad continued, his voice heavy with finality. Same number, same timestamps, same words you typed. There is no way out of this. Dad's jaw was tight, trembling slightly. You sent this. You confessed. You lied to me for 13 years. The room was dead quiet. The weight of the 13 years of injustice was suddenly crushing the people who had created it. Kendra was staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Mom had her hand over her mouth, but it was just another theatrical gesture. Garrett tried again, desperation making him sloppy. I was scared, okay? I was a kid and I panicked. And you were 17, Dad bit out. Old enough to know better. Old enough to let your brother get beaten and thrown out for something you did. It was a mistake. You made a choice. Dad corrected, his voice starting to rise, the control finally slipping. Every single day for 13 years, you made the choice to stay quiet. You went to college on my dime. Got your car. Got your apartment. All while he, Dad swung his hand and pointed directly at me, still standing by the door, was working doubles, washing dishes at a diner and sleeping in his grandpa's spare room. You got the golden life, and he got the snow. Garrett finally looked at me, not with malice, but with a plea for help. I'm sorry. Okay, I was wrong. I should have. Garrett's mouth was open, stammering out a useless apology. I'm sorry, okay? I was wrong. I should have. The slap was so fast, so sudden, that the sound of it cracked through the dead silence of the room like a gunshot. Dad's hand came across Garrett's face with devastating force. Garrett's head snapped violently to the side. He grabbed his stinging cheek, his eyes wide with shock, staring at Dad in absolute disbelief. He had just received the same punishment, the same instantaneous, violent rage that he had watched me take 13 years earlier. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Dad stood over him, breathing heavily. You watched me throw out the wrong kid and let it happen. Garrett's mouth opened again, but nothing came out. The golden boy, the untouchable, was suddenly a scapegoat, and he was completely unprepared for the reality of Dad's unshielded fury. Dad turned, his attention whipping to Kendra. And you, he demanded. You knew the whole time. Kendra's eyes went wide, swimming in fear. Dad, I don't. Don't you dare, Dad warned, his hand shaking not from fear, but from the raw, barely restrained rage coursing through him. You backed his story, and then you sat at my table for 13 years pretending you didn't. Every holiday, every dinner, every conversation, you lied to my face and let him suffer. He pointed at me again. Kendra started crying, a sharp, choked sound, clearly terrified by the direct, targeted anger. Mom finally tried to stand up, desperate to restore order to her shattered perfect life. Please, let's just sit down and talk this through. Dad fixed her with a look of pure contempt. Mom, sit down. Mom sat. She remained frozen on the couch, her carefully curated role as the suffering victim completely defunct. Dad looked around the ruined room, Garrett holding his face, Kendra sobbing uncontrollably, Mom motionless on the couch. The empire of lies was reduced to rubble. Then he looked at me. I stood there, arms crossed, emotionless. I wasn't scared, I wasn't even angry. I was simply observing the payment being extracted. Brendan, Dad said. His voice was cracked, the sheer force of his humiliation finally breaking through his hard exterior. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not believing you. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for 13 years of thinking you were the problem when it was me. I threw out the wrong kid. He was apologizing. The man who had defined my life through violence and cold dismissal was apologizing. His voice was genuinely broken, filled with the devastating pain of a self-inflicted wound. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, letting the words hang in the air, allowing the weight of his guilt to settle squarely on his shoulders. Dad turned back to Garrett and Kendra, the emotional storm within him finding a new, terrifying focus. You're both out, he stated, his voice flat, resolute, and utterly final. I'm rewriting my will first thing tomorrow. You're out of my house, out of my life. You want to rebuild from nothing like he did? Go ahead. See how it feels. Garrett stumbled to his feet, his jaw working uselessly. Dad, please, you can't be serious. Get out, Dad said, cutting him off. Where am I supposed to go? Garrett pleaded. That's not my problem anymore, Dad replied. Garrett, completely desperate and beaten, looked at me, the person he had betrayed, as if I was still going to save him, as if I owed him one last shield. I stared back, expressionless, silent. I offered him nothing. He grabbed his jacket, slammed the door behind him, the sound of the exit echoing the one I made 13 years ago. Kendra was still sobbing, crumpled on the couch. Daddy, please! It was just a mistake. You too. Out. She looked at Mom, begging for intervention, for her mother to finally save her. Mom wouldn't look at her, lost in her own self-pity. Kendra finally got up and walked out, closing the door quieter this time, the sound of her departure far less dramatic than Garrett's, but just as final. The room was silent, save for Mom's quiet, self-absorbed sobbing. Dad looked at me again, his face a roadmap of regret. Brendan, can we talk, please? No, I said, my voice as hard and cold as the January air he had banished me into. I know I don't deserve. You don't? I cut him off, finally walking into the living room, taking a position of authority. You're right about that. I'm trying to make this right. You can't, I said. What's done is done. You made your choice 13 years ago. This, I gestured around the shattered room. This is just you dealing with the consequences of that choice. It has nothing to do with me. What can I do? He pleaded, genuinely desperate to shed his guilt through action. Nothing, I said, watching his hope die. There's nothing you can do. I don't need your apology. I don't need your money. I don't need anything from you. I never have since Pop picked me up. I turned and walked toward the door. I paused with my hand on the knob, looking back one last time at the wreckage, the weeping mother, the broken father, the empty spaces where the golden children once sat. Enjoy your clean house, I said. I walked out, got into my car, and drove home. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I left the consequences exactly where they belonged. I walked out of my mother's house and left the wreckage behind me. The cold air of the evening felt clean and clear compared to the suffocating emotional atmosphere I had just abandoned. I drove home, feeling an overwhelming sense of finality. Pop was waiting up, sitting in his armchair reading a book. He looked up when I came in. How'd it go? He asked, his voice calm, betraying nothing. Dad slapped Garrett in front of everyone, I reported, removing my jacket. Cut them both out of his will, kicked them out of the house, and apologized to me. Pop nodded slowly, returning to his reading. Good. He stood up, stretching slightly. Want some tea? Yeah. Sure. The conversation was over. The stability of our home swallowed the drama of the night without effort. The justice had been served, not by my hand directly, but by the undeniable evidence I had provided, forcing Dad to consume his own children. 2 days after the family meeting, Garrett showed up at my house. I saw his beat-up car pull into the street from the living room window. He looked rough, unshaven, wrinkled clothes like he'd been sleeping in his car or some cheap motel. He had a small duffel bag with him. He knocked on the door. I didn't answer. He knocked again, louder. I know you're in there, Brendan. Just let me in. We need to talk. Pop came out from the kitchen, saw Garrett through the window, and gave me a silent, questioning look. Want me to handle it? No, I said. I got this. I opened the door, but left the security chain locked, leaving a 4-inch gap between us. I asked. I need a place to stay, Garrett pleaded, the desperation in his eyes matching the panic in his texts. Dad really kicked me out. I have nowhere else to go. No. Come on, man. I'm your brother. You're the guy who ruined my childhood to save himself. I countered, my voice flat. That's it. That's all you are. I apologized, you confessed. That's not the same thing. I have nowhere else to go. That's your situation. I shut the door in his face, locked it, and walked away. He pounded on the door for maybe 5 minutes, yelling about family, second chances, and how I was heartless. Then his voice faded, and I heard his car start up and drive away. Pop was watching from the kitchen doorway. Feel bad? No, I replied honestly. He went back to the kitchen, and the conversation was over. The permanent wall was up. The next week was a spam flood of guilt from all three of them. Different tones, same theme. Kendra tried one more time about a month later. She tracked me down at my work and waited in the parking lot until my shift ended. I saw her leaning against her car. She looked stressed, clearly struggling now that Dad had cut her off, and she actually had to support herself without the golden safety net. I have a deal for you, she said quickly when I walked past her. I kept walking toward my car. Just hear me out. Dad wants to talk. He'll help with, I don't know, whatever you need. Down payment on a bigger place, a new truck, whatever. Just sit down with him once. I stopped, turned around slowly, and looked at her. You're trying to broker a reconciliation so you can get back in the will. Her face went red with shame. I just wanted to make things right. Yeah, it is. You think if I forgive him, he'll soften up and let you back in? That's the play. We're family, Brendan. No, you were insurance. You watched what happened to me and stayed quiet because it was safer. Now you're scrambling because the safety's gone. That's your problem, Kendra. I found my safety 13 years ago. I blocked her number that night. 2 weeks later, an envelope showed up at my house with no return address. But I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single Thanksgiving photo, Mom, Garrett, and Kendra, with an empty chair dead center in the frame. My old spot, positioned like a prop. Written across the back in Mom's shaky script were 2 sentences. We miss you. There's always a place for you here. I stared at the picture for 10 seconds, taking in the audacity of her continued performance. Then I trashed it and went back to the garage to work on my latest engineering project. Pop looked up when I came in. What was that? Mom trying again. Work. No. Good. I haven't heard a word since. Dad rewrote the will. Garrett and Kendra got nothing. Mom still mails birthday cards I don't open. I'm here, in a house I bought with money I earned, eating dinner with Pop, and building whatever I want in my garage. They had 13 years to be family. They failed. Now they get the version of me that doesn't care. Pop glanced over his book at me. The sound of Pop turning a page was the only thing I heard. You good? Yeah, I replied, looking around the quiet, safe house I had earned. I'm good. And for once, I meant it completely.